want to talk to you a little bit about the Hawks and this season. They got off to a very slow start at 4-9. I know that was disappointing for a lot of people. What was going on with the Hawks that you saw with them this season that got them off to this slow start?
Yeah, it's been an odd one because obviously expectations were high, and there's been a few different things going on as to why their start's been a little sluggish. I think even just starting with the Hawks themselves have been a little sluggish. Coming into training camp and preseason, they didn't have a ton of time to get the core to really play together. There were various injuries going on. Kevin Herter could barely run for preseason. Capella was on a minute's restriction for some Achilles soreness. They were being cautious with other players as well, so they didn't have a lot of time to really gel. And players were hurt. Bogdan Bogdanovic recently revealed that he had hurt himself during the Cleveland game, which was a while ago now. And obviously they've been on a pretty extensive road trip where it was a pretty tough road trip. The schedule has not really been kind to the Hawks. They've played a lot of road games. They went 3-1 to start the season. I believe 7 of their next 9 games were on the road, and there are some tough games like the Nets. They were rough back-to-back with the likes of like a Golden State Jazz back-to-back on the road. That's tough. And then playing places like Phoenix and Denver. I'm not saying the schedule is to completely absolve them from some of their early season struggles, but I think it's definitely played a part as well.
Yeah, they definitely have had a rough start to the season schedule-wise. But also, Graham, the expectation surrounding the Hawks was very high coming into this season. Right? You know, we had the Cinderella run, if you want to say, last year, beating the Knicks, beating the Sixers, getting to the conference finals against the Bucks. So a lot of people had the Hawks, hey, they could be a top 3 team in the East. Do you feel those lofty expectations that people might have had for Atlanta has impacted how they've played to start the season?
I think there's been a few times where they've tried perhaps a little too hard at times to get back into some games they were chasing, but I don't think the expectations as a whole have really hindered them. I think some of their defensive issues have held them back. Clint Capella hasn't totally been healthy early on. Some of the on-off court numbers for him for last season compared to this season are quite startling in terms of the Hawks defense. So he hasn't been completely healthy as well. So I wouldn't read too much into a bigger picture like that. I certainly think the Hawks are. I would say, I guess you could say them to some extent they're going through the motions. One of the things Trae Young talked about after one of the games was that he alluded to was that the regular season is a little boring to have to go through this whole early season process again. So I wouldn't say expectations as a whole have held them back. Just other aspects have kind of hurt them early on.
You talked about the star of the team, Trae Young, and his start to the season wasn't that great as well, Graham. He, struggling shooting the ball. He talked about the new officiating and how he felt that was affecting a lot of players in the league. What do you make of his start, and do you feel like he's starting to turn it around as well?
Yeah, he's definitely started to turn it around. He's averaging 25 on 45% and 39% from 3. So the numbers have definitely kind of come back for Young. And in terms of the officiating, yes, his free throws are definitely down. A lot of players' free throw attempts across the league are down. I think some of those comments were taken a little bit to the extreme. What Young has been a little bit more bothered by is that he's not getting calls when he's been either he's been taking a lot of contact and not getting calls. I think that side of things has something that's kind of bothered him a little bit more than the new rules coming into play. Now there's definitely times where he goes up to take a shot and he knows he's not I think he sometimes even understands as he goes up oh, I'm not going to get this call, has to get it away to a teammate. But I think the officiating that he's been bothered with, I guess more so, has been him just getting battered inside. Because one of the stories that came out, I think it may have been during the opening broadcast of the season for on TNT when they played the Mavericks, was that Young, he sat with Monty McCutcheon and went through some of the new rules and tried to get a better understanding of what would or wouldn't be called. So I think he's like others are just adjusting, but I think he's just been a little bit more annoyed that he's not getting some of those calls inside.
Yeah, and I've noticed that watching Trae Young, it's not, I think what a lot of people thought about, and you kind of were alluding to, Graham, is that the calls on the perimeter. It's been more when he's gone inside. I've noticed that he's gotten hit pretty hard. And that's where I think a lot of players, maybe some of the players that got higher free throw rates in the past, are a little frustrated. It's the calls inside where they're not getting the same calls that they used to. So I can understand Trae's frustration there. I also got to ask you about DeAndre Hunter. Just got the news a few days ago. Broken wrist. He'll miss about 2 months is what we'll see for DeAndre Hunter. How big is this injury for a guy that was starting to play well, played well last year, and then got hurt during the regular season? How big is this injury, and how much do you think it impacts the Atlanta Hawks going forward?
Yeah, it's huge. It's huge for the short term of the season because, like you mentioned, he played well last season. And one of the big what ifs of the Hawks' postseason run was what if he was healthy in the obviously the Philly and the Milwaukee series beyond. And look, he's there. He's arguably their best perimeter defender. Obviously, you can see that on night one where he really limited Luka Doncic against the Mavericks, and they just rely on him to be that a two-way player for them. So his absence is going to be really, really sorely missed, both more so defensively, but also offensively when he can obviously go off for and help relieve some of that scoring pressure on the likes of Young.
Do you think the Hawks need to shake anything up? Anytime a team gets off to a slow start, Graham, you'll hear, maybe we need to change things. So one of the things the Hawks have been lauded for before last offseason and going into last season was their depth. And we saw that really help them as they turned things around last season and into the playoffs. They are a very deep team, but there have been some players like a Danilo Gallinari that hasn't looked so great thus far this season. Do you think the Hawks need to make a trade, especially in wake of the DeAndre Hunter injury, or should they just play it out with this roster and the depth that they currently have?
I think they'll play it out with what they have. And if they were in a situation where their big situation was as it is for the whole season, like you've got Capella, Collins, and they had to sign Gorgie Jeng in the off season, I think maybe you might look to maybe leverage one of those wings into a big that can help. But they know help will be eventually coming with Onyeka Okongwu when he comes back. He looked great in the playoffs. Rookie last season, 6th overall pick. When he comes back, I think they'll really be bolstered by that. So I think they just have to. I think they have enough to be getting on with, certainly in terms of offensive firepower. Even defensively, look, they won't be as strong as they would be with Hunter, but I still think they've got more than enough to be getting on with. And I don't think they need to really panic. Then they may look to shift one of those wings anyway. Maybe this would be sacrilege to the fan base, but possibly Cam Reddish. I wouldn't surprise if they were to look at options revolving him, but I see them very much staying put, and help will come to them when Okongwu comes back and Hunter comes back, and they just continue to get the legs underneath them.
I want to, since you brought up Cam Reddish there, which I think is the guy you hear a lot, and I know the Hawks fan base has been reluctant to let go of him, but they've got a plethora of guys that can play in the wing. Do you think they're able to keep everyone? They just extended Herter. Are they going to be able to keep all of these guys? It feels like somebody would have to go at some point, if not this year, but at some point, right, Graham?
Yeah, it certainly feels like you can't pay everyone, and I think people are acutely aware of that. And I think one of these wings eventually will have to fall by the wayside. And I would struggle to see it being Hunter, given what he adds on both ends. Reddish, look, there could be a lot of upside there. He hasn't had the best start of the season. He's been very up and down. That's kind of been his story of his young career so far. These are guys in year year 3, I believe.
Yeah.
Got my timing mixed up.
Well, the timing's been messed up for all of us the last couple of years, so I get it. Yeah.
So I mean, these extensions, obviously they're extension eligible next summer. So I find it hard to think they're going to pay all of them. So I expect that sooner or later that one of these guys is going to have to fall by the wayside.
Yeah, got you on that. All right, the Hawks, after the 4-9 start, they have won back-to-back games, Graham. Do you think they're starting to turn things around? You talked about the tough schedule, the recent West Coast trip they were on. They've come back home again. We'll talk about the game against the Celtics tonight. But do you think they're at this point where they're starting to turn things around? They're now 6-9, getting back into the race in the Eastern Conference. Are the Hawks turning things right around at this point?
I think it's too early to tell for the time being. They've just come home. I think they've been buoyed by just being home. They have a good home. They've been playing very well at home, especially under Nate McMillan. I think they're just happy to be home after what was really a really rough trip. Now, in saying that as well, Clint Capella has looked a lot better of late, and I think he will continue to get better. And like I'm looking at his, I mentioned the on off court ratings. Their defensive rating with him on the court 117, which is the worst on the team, and their defensive rating when he's off the court 97.7.
Wow.
That those numbers, like that's not the Clint Capella that people are accustomed to seeing. Like, and this highlights how he has struggled. So the fact that he's looking better can only help the Hawks in, because they describe him so often as the anchor of their defense. And look, when look, Trae Young, offensive juggernaut, but defensively struggles, and you need strong support at the back to help you when at the times he is beaten off of the dribble and defend, and the offensive player gets in behind. So I think definitely coinciding with his Capella's improved look on the court, I think the Hawks will. I think certainly they can overcome their early struggles.
Okay, we'll see what they do. But tonight they have the Boston Celtics down there at State Farm Arena, and the Celtics, they've been up and down, 7-7 right now. Hawks, as I said, 6-9. What are the keys to the Hawks keeping this going? 2-game spurt they've had, making it a 3-game streak. What are the keys for the Hawks to get a win tonight against the Celtics?
Well, they're certainly helped by the fact that Jaylen Brown, I think, is already ruled out for tonight's game. And if Robert Williams is out as well, that presents a real opportunity for the Hawks, certainly in terms of in their front court. If they have to deploy the likes of Al Horford and even Jabari Parker at the 5, that's a situation where Capella and especially John Collins, I think, will certainly really thrive in. And I'd be looking for that as an area the Hawks could really target. They've been, in many ways, just need to keep doing what they're doing. In many ways, like their turnovers have been really strong this year, only 12.7 per game, which is third best in the league. They've been doing some good things really well. Like offensive rebounding has been a strength for them. John Collins has been getting to the free throw line a bit himself of late. I think they just need to just carry on what they've been doing over the last few, even to the end of that road trip. They were beginning to book some of the nastier trends. But I definitely think if Robert Williams is missing tonight for the Celtics, I think there's a real opportunity for the likes of Collins and Capella to improve. To continue to show the strong form that they have over the very small sample, 2 games back at home.
Yeah, Celtics will be lacking a lot of size there, so that's a way the Hawks can take advantage. Last thing before I let you go, Graham, do you think the Hawks, where do you think they can finish this season? There was a slow start. There were the lofty expectations we talked about at the top of this segment. But where do you see the Hawks in terms of expectations? Where do you see this team going? Can they build upon what they did last season?
I think they can, although it might not be apparent in the regular season. I think now that Hunter is out for this extended period, now obviously Okongu's been out all season and might not be back until roughly January. I think it could be a similar situation to last season where you might not see the best of them until the likes of January, February, March, when everyone's back together. And will it be too late in terms of a top 3 seed by that time? It's hard to say, but I definitely think they can get back to the playoffs, and they've got more than enough, I think, to get through to the second round. But obviously, from there, matchups and series really will dictate how far they can go. But I certainly see them as a playoff side, with a playoff team with upside to get in a few rounds in here.
Not bad. Hawks fans will want to see that, that's for sure. If they play the Knicks again, Knicks fans are not going to want to see what they did to them at the Garden. That is for sure as well. That is Graham Chapple. He is a writer for Peachtree Hoops. Graham, thanks for joining me. Sorry the webcam didn't work. Next time you're on, I'll definitely see you. We'll get that all worked out, but I really appreciate the time. Thank you, man.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.